F-18 fighter pilots duking it out. The government maintains the F-35 is the best and the only plane that can replace Canada's aging CF-18s, and they're spending billions on the new stealth fighters. But why does one retired major with intimate knowledge of Canada's CF-18 fleet say Canada's making a big mistake? Take a look at the hot sheet on this guy, Steve Fuhr. Fuhr is a 20-year veteran of the Canadian Forces. He served as a CF-18 pilot between 1999 and 2003. Fuhr managed Canada's fleet of 79 CF-18s for 5 years, advising on deployment, support, and training for the CF-18s, and tasking them with jobs. Plus, Fuhr was a Canadian fighter evaluation officer for NORAD and NATO that included managing Canada's fighter resources for those organizations. So, why does the guy with such extensive knowledge and experience with Canada's fighter jets say the F-35 replacements are not the right planes for the job? What planes should the government be considering to replace the CF-18s? Joining me now from Calgary, the former CF-18 fleet manager and flight evaluation officer for both NORAD and NATO, Steve Fuhr, is here. How are you doing, Mr. Fuhr?
Very good. Thank you for having me on the show today.
My pleasure. You know Canada's CF-18 inside and out through your role with NATO and NORAD. You're well versed in the Allies' fighter capabilities. We'll get to that in a second, but very quickly, from your perspective, is the F-35 the right plane for Canada to purchase now?
It definitely is not the right tool for the job. There's many ways. We could talk tactically, we could talk price. I mean, one of the biggest factors right out of the gate, it's a single-engine fighter. We got a lot of land mass. We're going north more and more. Northern sovereignty operations is increasing. There's lots of reasons for Canada to be up north, and a single-engine airplane is just not going to cut the mustard. And that's one of many technical reasons, but that's primarily the biggest reason. Canada's never had a single-engine air defense fighter up north.
But what's the problem with a single-engine air fighter?
Well, if the engine fails, you're pretty much done. We don't have, I mean, our land mass is humongous. I've flown those airplanes up there. Search and rescue resources aren't there at a flip of a switch. It takes time. And there's nothing there. So if the engine does fail, and they will, look at the Qantas Trent 900 engine, top-notch technology, best in the world. It failed. They do fail. So when it fails, there's no backup. And you know, all the other nations out there that are flying fighters, you know, some of the nations that are going to buy this JSF, they're either replacing an F-16 with the JSF, or the other ones are running multi-fleet fighter forces. They're going to fly Eurofighter and JSF. They're going to fly F-15 and JSF or F-22. Canada's the only one on the list that's replacing a twin-engine fighter solely with a single-engine fighter. Everybody else is either a small country that's replacing an F-16 or is going to have a multi-engine fighter in addition to. There you go.
So the one issue you've got is that it's a single engine. The other issue. What about the other issues? Let's go. Cost issue. Well, they say they can get this. They're going to say $9 billion is what they're going to say, but they've said $75 million a plane. You've looked at this. What's your assessment?
Well, I mean, I hope we can get back to the other discussion, but on cost, I mean, I pulled up the, right off the D&D website here, forcesjet.gc.ca, next generation fighter capability comparison of costing. It compares Kevin Page's, the parliamentary budget officer, who I know you know, his estimation of $29.3 billion with D&D's estimation of 14.7. I've seen 16, I've seen 18. That number keeps crawling up. But at the end of the day, there is no way in the world, and everybody and their dog knows this, that airplane is going to be that much money. The GAO report, which Winslow Wheeler and you discussed before, talks about huge overruns. I'm looking at it right now in front of me. They talk about the program doubling average unit price, and you know, after 9 years in development and 4 years in production, the JSF program has not fully demonstrated that the aircraft is stable. Manufacturing processes are mature.
What if the government says there's 3 different platforms? The platforms you're talking about are the jump jet, the marine one, but the F-35A, the basic platform that Canada's buying, they said that's meeting capabilities, meeting requirements, and they say they can get it on price because they're buying at peak production. What's your response to that?
Well, my response to that is that there's no doubt that the vertical takeoff and landing variant is having a lot more problems. That is a fact. They're all having problems. Reference your price. I mean, the bottom line is that I've heard that too, and we hear the term apples and oranges, and we're not comparing things correctly, or we don't know this, or we don't know that. But at the end of the day, and this is out of the Ottawa Citizen, it was a quote from Tom Burbage, says, Canada will pay whatever the aircraft costs the year that it is purchased. So it pretty much takes the argument out of the equation. Our understanding of what we think we're going to pay and what we're going to pay are two totally different things. I think Kevin Page and some of his documents say the numbers that D&D were running with look mysteriously like 2001 Lockheed Martin numbers. The program has changed so much since then that the bottom line is the manufacturer's saying that we pay for what it costs when we purchase it. That's the end of the discussion. That's the fact.
Laurie Hahn, who is listening to this, and the government will say the F-35 is the only so-called fifth-generation fighter. It's the only game in town. The U.S. has a lot invested in it. They'll make it work. We already are getting what they call IRB, industrial benefits, regional benefits from this. What's your take that this is the only game in town, the only fifth-generation stealth fighter, therefore they want to give the military the best? You're a former pilot. You ran this stuff. Is this the best piece of machinery out there?
I also flew this airplane. I flew the F-18. I think the F-35, it may be a great airplane. It's not the right airplane for Canada. It doesn't have two engines. It won't carry as many weapons. I mean, when fighters cease to carry weapons, they're not fighters anymore, they're planes. So for northern sovereignty operations, we only have a few airplanes, so our airplanes have to be effective with lots of weapons. So an F-18 Super Hornet, which is what I propose meets the mail for us, it was probably the closest contender. Arguably, I don't even think we looked at it as closely as we should have. It carries more weapons. It's net-centric. It does a lot of similar things. The thing that it won't do compared to an F-35 is it's not as stealthy. It's called low observable. The F-35 is very low observable, but at the end of the day, it's certainly not, in my opinion, not worth the money. And there's other things that you can do with the F-18 Super Hornet that you can't do with the F-35. The F-18 Super Hornet can refuel itself. It's got a tanker role where you can put tanks on it, and it can act as an airborne tanker. That's going to be a big problem for Canada.
What about when Canada says they have to be interoperable, that the U.S. is going to have the F-35, the Allies are going to have the F-35? Why should we purchase a Super Hornet, which is the generation below this, and we won't have interoperability with the next generation over the next 30 or 40 years? Okay,
you know what? They should have. Boeing would have probably done themselves a favor if they would have called the Super Hornet the F-22 or the F-21. The F-18 Super Hornet was actually, it is significantly different than the airplane we have. It's bigger. It's a different airplane. It looks a lot like the Legacy Hornet, but it's a different machine. It reached operational capability, I believe, in 2000. The Block 2, which is the latest upgraded version, it's only been on the street since 2006. In terms of interoperability, it will absolutely positively be interoperable with our allies out into the future, as long as JSF or F-22 or any of these other fighters, Eurofighter, Typhoon. And here's a quote. This came out in Bloomberg yesterday, and this will take the wind out of a couple people's sails. And this is a quote from the Secretary of Defense, Leon Panetta. He says, and I quote, "The F-35 is intended to complement the F-18EF, not replace it. The Navy needs the capabilities that both aircraft will provide."
All right, now just for the record, the U.S. Navy might be buying a different variant of the F-35, as you say, the jump jet, the takeoff and landing. But last question to you. Some have wondered, why would a guy who was the fleet manager of the CF-18s, was a CF-18 pilot, you were a fighter evaluation officer, you know a lot about this. Why are you coming out so strongly now against the F-35?
Well, I mean, obviously, when you're in the Air Force, you're bound. You can't, you have to go with the flow. You can't really say anything. I've been out for a couple of years now. I'm watching this progress, and to me, it is crystal clear that the F-18 Super Hornet is the airplane for Canada. I'm not saying the F-35 won't be a great airplane, but it's way too much money. Realistically, we don't know what it's going to cost. We have not signed a contract, so we can walk away from this. The money we invested initially, the $160 million, we've gotten back in contracts. I think I've heard you guys even talk about it on this program, where we've received $350 million back in benefits. The benefit package that they're offering for the JSF, the F-35, they've even changed the definition of that. It's $12 billion competitive against the 8 partner nations. So we have the ability to participate for a share of $12 billion. That means that maybe we'll get 1/8, maybe we'll get a bit more, maybe we'll get nothing. Who knows? Whereas if we go with this Boeing product on the money side, we get dollar for dollar, everything back. We could get this Super Hornet with the twin engines, the interoperability, all the bells and whistles, 100% money back to this country for the budget that they originally had, for, I would say, for 14.7 or less. All the tooling, training, that's already in place. That's the benefit of going with a system that's similar but better than the one we have.
Steve, here, I got to leave it there for today because I know I want to get a response from the government representative, a former CF-18 test pilot, a guy you know well, Laurie Hahn. We'll hear his response to you. Steve Fuhrer, I appreciate your time today.
My pleasure. Say hi to Laurie for me.
I will say hi to Laurie because Laurie Hahn is right here, conservative MP and former CF-18 pilot and squadron commander, so he knows a thing or two about the planes. Laurie Hahn, you've been listening in to Steve Fuhr. You know Steve Fuhr, right?
I know Picasso well, yeah.
Picasso, his call sign. Okay, these guys are both pilots. Let's just get at it. He says this is the wrong plane for a couple of reasons. First of all, he says for Canada, wrong plane because it's a single engine, too dangerous. Your response?
Well, you know, the engine technology has changed dramatically since the days when I was part of the evaluation team evaluating the F18 and the F16, for example. That's what it came down to. The engine technology with the F35 is so far advanced from the kind of airplanes that Steve was talking about, is more familiar with. The blades on the you know, an F18 engine, for example, are about maybe half an inch thick. The blades on the F35 engine are a couple of inches thick. I mean, you can literally throw a toaster down the intake of an F35 and it will spit it out. You know,
this guy he retired in September of '09. He retired as a Czech school pilot in Winnipeg. I mean, he knows the planes well. He still says that, okay, the single engine he wants a double engine plane, and this is very rare for a country to replace a dual engine plane with a single engine plane, especially in a country as big as Canada.
Well, the simple fact is, again, we are looking at advancing technology, and I've been an evaluation pilot in NATO and NORAD as well. And have flown a lot of F-18s, as Steve has also. Technology moves on. You know, we talked about, or Steve talked about, you know, the Super Hornet. Absolutely, great airplane. It's a marked improvement over our F-18s, and it'll be a great airplane and interoperable for about the next 15, 20 years. The last conversation I had with the commander of naval aviation in the U.S. was that they plan to fly the F-18 till about 2020. This may stretch out now to about 2025. We're going to fly whatever airplane we buy till at least 2050.
But given all the controversy about the F-35, the fact that we still don't know the exact price per plane, even you admit that we've got a $9 billion envelope, but we actually don't know the exact cost per plane. Is that fair to say?
Well, it is fair to say. I mean, that's why we're in a memorandum of understanding with nine countries. And year by year, you know, we will pay the same that the U.S. Air Force pays. Every year we'll negotiate along with our partners. You know, any particular year we may want 8. The USAF may want 100. The Brits may want 4.
The government
and we'll
sold
put that
this
together.
The government originally said this would be $75 million a plane. Let's just establish, you and I, you're saying $9 billion is the overall envelope. You know, that number that the government first sold, and I had Peter MacKay, the Secretary, the Minister of Defense on. Are you saying we should scrap the number $75 million per plane and just say, because that's what 65 planes were supposed to go for, is that number no longer on the table?
Well, Evan, as you know, I haven't used that number for a long time, nor has anybody else in the government. The real number is $9 billion for the program. And that's for aircraft and spares and simulators and so on.
So if that number is no longer there, and there's been a lot of controversy about the cost of the particular variant that Canada's buying, do you have any idea what we would pay per plane for this? Because there's a lot of questions about the spiraling costs of this thing.
Well, first of all, it is, and I know Steve doesn't like to hear apples and oranges, but it is some apples and oranges. The numbers we get out of the GAO are a conglomeration of the A, B, and C variants. We're talking about the A variant, which is the cheapest, and so on. We know that. We have some flexibility. You know, the F-18s, our F-18s, we're going to fly till about 2020. We can buy our airplanes at any point along that curve between now and then. So we do have the flexibility of waiting to see what's happening with the program. And we're going to buy them collectively with the other members of the MOU, and we will negotiate collectively the best price for that year.
All right, now we're throwing around a lot of acronyms, MOU, Memorandum of Understanding. I'm going to throw around a little acronym, ATQ, which we've got here now at Power and Politics, which is answer the question. So I'm going to ask you, Mr. Hahn, do we have a price per plane here?
No, and I've said that before, and I've told you that before. It's we've got a $9 billion program. Year by year, we're going to negotiate a price for how many airplanes we want that year. Might be 10, 12, whatever. We do that collectively with the other 8 members of the MOU. That's where we have some strength of numbers. That's where we've got some negotiating power. That's the strength of being in a memorandum of understanding with a number of other countries, a number of other forces, especially the United States Air Force and Navy and Marine Corps.
Steve here says that the interoperability argument doesn't really work because, you know, the F18, you know the cost of it. It's a good, or sorry, the Super Hornet, you know the cost of it. You can get it now. There's no controversy about the price. You can get industrial regional benefits. You can fly it for 20 years. The U.S. Navy's deciding to add it. And if the F-35 eventually sorts out all its cost issues, then you could buy the F-35 later. Why not buy some Super Hornets now?
It's too late, Evan. We don't have the luxury of being able to, you know, to buy an F-18, to buy an airplane for 20 years, and then buy another one for the next 20 years.
Why not?
Just in terms of use of taxpayers' dollars, we've got a limited amount of money. We're going to be buying an airplane for the next 40 or more years.
Why can't you buy them both? Why can't you spend?
Because we can't afford it.
But
we simply can't afford it.
But you don't even know the cost per plane of the F-35s, but you do know the cost of the Super Hornet, so you could make a budget for the Super Hornet, buy 20 Super Hornets, and then if there's money left over and the F-35 comes,
Evan, with respect, you don't know how air forces operate. A mixed fleet is much more expensive than buying a single, you know, a single airplane. We